Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into what we're calling the reckoning. This is really the origin story of the K-12 data crisis. It's that exact moment when a federal accountability mandate finally crashed into decades of, well, institutional belief, not verifiable numbers.
It was a monumental clash. I mean, for generations, if a school principal said, this is our dropout rate, that was it. That was the rate.
Right. End of story.
Exactly. If an administrator claimed they were serving the at-risk population, everyone just accepted it. The whole system was siloed, it was opaque, and it was really just designed to run on consensus.
But then federal grants started attaching money to measurable data. And that changed everything. Suddenly, you had to track specific cohorts and outcomes, and you had to use these standardized methods. And that's when the institutional foundation just began to shake. Because the data that came back, it didn't confirm what educators believed. It revealed something completely different.
And deeply uncomfortable. That revelation created an immediate divide. When the truth came out, some people, some educators, they had this profound transformation, genuine shock, and then a real desire to fix the systems they now realize were flawed.
We know one principal from that time who later said the whole experience changed his professional life.
But that wasn't everyone's reaction.
No. For others, that same revelation triggered a full-scale coordinated war.
A war fought not over the methodology, right? Not about Excel formulas.
No, it was a war over institutional power and self-preservation.
And that's our mission today, to unpack that origin story, see the resistance it created, and then show how those same core failures are still with us decades later.
Okay, so let's start where it all began. The freshman academies. This was a big 5-year dropout prevention grant. It was focused on at-risk freshmen at about 16 high schools in a large district. For the first 3 years, our evaluation team, we called ourselves EDSTAR, we did what evaluators always did. We just documented attendance and reported the dropout rates the principals gave us.
Simple, clean, trusting, totally trusting.
But that trust, it kind of ran out in year 4.
It did. The U.S. Department of Education mandated a standardized calculation method. And suddenly, you couldn't just invent a number.
You had to use a real formula?
A standard cohort calculation, yeah. Take the official roster on, say, October 30th, track any verified transfers out, and they'd calculate exactly who made it to the end of the year. You actually had to account for students moving around during the school year.
And this is where the house of cards fell.
Completely. We found principals were calculating rates in these wildly creative ways, sometimes, deliberately misleading ways.
Okay, give us the specific example. The principal with that suspiciously low dropout rate. What exactly was he doing?
Oh, he was a perfect example of this institutional opacity. His method was to take the student roster from the very last day of school.
Okay.
And then he would only count students who failed to show up in September as dropouts.
Wait, so if a student dropped out in October?
Or November.
Or March.
Ignored. Just not in his statistics at all. They vanished. He was basically only tracking who didn't come back after summer break.
I can't even imagine what happened when you showed him the federally required calculation. His rate must have just skyrocketed.
It went up dramatically, and his reaction wasn't concern for the students. It was just pure fury aimed right at us, the evaluators.
What did he say?
He claimed we had no right to tell him how to do his job, that it was up to principals to decide how to compute the dropout rate. He demanded that we throw out our numbers and use his original ones.
He was asking you to falsify data on a federal grant.
That is exactly what he was demanding.
That one moment just captures the whole collision, doesn't it? The data exposed his performance, and his only move was to attack the data. But it didn't stop with dropout rates. The grant also required something new, you said, measurable objectives.
Right. Schools had to get past this vague term, at risk. They had to define their target populations with actual criteria. Students failing algebra, students with high absences, discipline problems, things you can actually count. We had to check if they were even serving the right kids.
And when you pulled that pre-data across all 16 high schools, that's when you hit the core revelation, the 85% mismatch.
It was a bombshell. 85% of the students in these freshman academies, they were not the target population.
Not at all.
They'd never failed a course. They were on track to graduate on time. Clean attendance records, no discipline problems. These were kids who were already succeeding.
Hold on, 85% is? That's too high to be an accident. Were they trying to sabotage the program, or was it something else?
It was absolutely a failure of intent versus outcome. It was driven by a really natural human bias.
How so?
Well, educators have been asked to refer at-risk kids with very high potential. So they selected students they believed in, kids they wanted to help. The ones who seemed like they would really benefit from the extra attention.
So they didn't pick the ones who were actually struggling.
They avoided them. Consciously or unconsciously, they didn't pick the students failing algebra or getting suspended. Because those kids are a massive lift, and, they might make the program's success rate look bad.
The cognitive dissonance for the staff must have been staggering. You think you're helping the most vulnerable kids, and the data shows you're just giving extra help to kids who are already doing fine.
For most of them, it was truly horrifying. They were just stunned. They had no idea. And for many, that moment sparked a real transformation, a real desire for change. It led the project lead to ask us, can you teach our staff how to use data to find the right students?
And that gap, that realization, that was the birth of the data academies.
That's where it all started, is when we first created the tools like the apples, oranges, and mangoes icons.
Highlighting that dual gap you talk about, it's not just a lack of skills, but a total lack of access to easy-to-use data in the first place.
Exactly. The problem wasn't malice. It was information blindness, and a system designed to make data unusable. But while many educators wanted to change, the institutional resistance, it just solidified.
Right. Let's talk about that. The coordinated campaign against EDSTAR, against the evaluators. When the data revealed these huge systemic failings, it was an immediate threat to the status quo. What was their agenda?
The resistance saw us as a challenge to their control over resources. Specifically, control over who gets into things like gifted programs or rigorous college prep courses.
That's where the power is.
That's their power, controlling that access.
Yeah.
We were just reporting on federal requirements, but they saw us as having this political agenda to tear down their gatekeeping roles.
And your notes mention some really surprising sources of hostility, the district data department and the academically gifted department. That seems so contradictory.
It shows you how political it was. The data department fought us because if teachers and principals could pull their own reports, what was the data department for? It threatened their existence.
And the gifted department?
They fought against any evidence showing they were missing talented students from underrepresented groups. It challenged the integrity of their whole selection process. So they actively tried to stop educators from working with us. Transparency was the enemy.
This perfectly illustrates what you call the information desert. You have that story about the principal who was at first so excited when you finally merged all his data.
He was ecstatic. Attendance, grades, test scores, all in one spreadsheet. He could finally see his vulnerable students.
But then he got angry.
Yes, but not at us. He got furious at his own district administration. He couldn't believe he had to hire an outside contractor, us, just to see basic information about his own students. The data existed on their servers, but the system had no skill and no will to make it usable.
And that hostility led to the ultimate reckoning, the award scandal. This was about an evaluation of a literacy program that found something catastrophic.
It was. It found that gifted students, level 4 students, were getting remedial services, and bizarrely, they were doing worse than their peers who got no services at all.
A completely counterintuitive, alarming finding.
And the district's director of research and evaluation, he claimed the report was unprofessional. He refused to share it with the school board, tried not to pay for it. He wanted it buried.
But then comes the twist. A staff member from his own department secretly submits that exact same report to the American Educational Research Association competition.
And it won first place. For exemplary evaluation reports, it was a complete validation of the analysis they tried to suppress.
The hypocrisy is just incredible.
Oh, it gets better. The director and that staff member, they went to a school board meeting and accepted congratulations for the award-winning report, the same report they said was garbage.
And they did it after stripping your authorship from the document? That's plagiarism.
Clear-cut plagiarism. It forced a very tense meeting with the assistant superintendent to sort it all out.
So what was the outcome?
Well, the official ban against us was eventually lifted, which allowed the data academies to move forward. But that hostility, that fear of transparency, it didn't go away. We have documented accounts of school counselors who wanted to work with us, but they had to meet our team in a church on a Sunday.
In a church?
Why? It was the only safe, neutral place they felt they could talk about data without their bosses finding out.
That is just a dramatic origin story, this violent struggle between transparency and self-protection. But what's truly terrifying is that this isn't just history. Which brings us to this astonishing modern example, the paper transcripts.
This incident just proves that fundamentally nothing has changed about data access. So recently, a district was debating whether to close its alternative schools. The accountability reports looked terrible.
What?
Poor on-time graduation rates. But the students were making great progress. The problem was they had dropped out for years, so on-time graduation was mathematically impossible. They were too far behind on credits when they started.
So to prove the metric was unfair, you needed the electronic transcript data to show how many credits they were missing on day one.
Right. We asked for the data file. A month later, we show up for a workshop, and we find district staff sitting with these huge stacks of paper transcripts.
No!
Yes. Manually reviewing them, making tally marks, calculating credit deficiencies by hand. They had been doing this all day, every day, for over a month. They didn't know how to find the electronic file.
They spent thousands of hours on manual labor because nobody could click export on a computer system. I can't believe that.
And the depth of the data illiteracy was profound. We did a follow-up to audit transcripts electronically after a scandal at a charter school, the lead high school counselor. She genuinely claimed there was no data file. She thought the computer was like a vending machine for paper.
Right.
That the data behind the printouts didn't exist in a way you could analyze.
A vending machine for paper. That is the perfect image for the information desert. It spits out documents but hides the truth. But you finally built a program to review the transcripts systematically. What did you find?
The errors were shocking. Students were retaking courses they'd already passed, sometimes with an A or a B. All because a counselor's memory failed or the paper trail was a mess. And at the same time, they were missing core classes they needed to graduate.
All of which was invisible without that electronic check.
And the most basic thing we needed to even write the audit formulas, a list of required courses for graduation, it didn't exist electronically. Counselors were just using their memory.
Just tribal knowledge and paper.
That was the system. The counselors themselves were shocked at the scale of errors they'd been missing. And the cost. I mean, the head of counseling estimated that her staff was spending 80% of their professional time on this manual review.
80%.
And still missing these catastrophic errors.
And this wasn't just a one-off thing, a problem in one district?
No. We checked. We talked to researchers in other states, other districts. They all confirmed it. Reviewing transcripts by hand, on paper, that was the standard procedure pretty much everywhere we looked.
So what does this all mean? The origin story, the 85% mismatch that showed the initial shock of failure. But the paper transcript story, decades later, proves that the core problem, the inability to get usable data, is still the crippling bottleneck.
It connects right back to that initial war. The resistance was never really about data methodology. It was about institutional self-protection. It was about the power structures that control who gets access to quality instruction, and relying on paper, on memory, on that 80% time drain that protects the status quo. It ensures the true picture stays hidden or is just too painful to assemble.
A perfect veil of complexity designed to sustain the flaws. So now, something for you to consider. We've seen this problem of data access has persisted for decades. If 80% of a professional school counselor's time is spent on manual, error-prone paperwork, what crucial support, what college counseling, what essential mental health mentorship are students not receiving today as a direct result of this ongoing information desert?